This story, Mr. Noisy. Mr. Noisy was a very, very noisy person indeed. For example, if Mr. Noisy was reading this story to you, he'd be shouting at the top of his voice. And the top of Mr. Noisy's voice is a very loud place indeed. You can hear it 100 miles away. For example, when most people sneeze, you can hear them in the next room. But when Mr. Noisy sneezes, you can hear him in the next country. Now this story starts when Mr. Noisy was asleep in bed in his bedroom in his house, which is on top of a hill. He was snoring as well, imagine when Mr. Noisy snores, that is a snore worth hearing. It sounds like a herd of elephants that I know. Then Mr. Noisy's alarm clock went off. Mr. Noisy's alarm clock sounds like no other alarm clock in the world. It sounds like a fire engine. Mr. Noisy woke up, and so did all people who live in Wobbletown. Mr. Noisy. Later that day, Mr. Noisy decided that he had to go shopping. He went out of his house, shutting the door behind him. Bang! The door wobbled, the house wobbled, the whole hill wobbled. Wobbletown wobbled, even a bird flying high above wobbled. No. Then Mr. Noisy walked down the hill. He walked into Baker's shop. Crash went the door as he opened it. Bang went the door as he shut it. I'd like a loaf of bread, boomed Mr. Noisy to Mrs. Crumb, the baker's wife. Mrs. Crumb trembled so it loud. Then Mr. Noisy walked along the street to the butcher. He walked into the butcher's shop. Crash went the door as he opened it. Bang went the door as he shut it. I'd like a piece of meat, boomed Mr. Noisy to Mr. Bacon the butcher. Mr. Bacon trembled and thought of some meat. Afterwards, Mrs. Crumb met Mr. Bacon in the street. We really must do something about Mr. Noisy being so noisy, she said. Absolutely, replied Mr. Bacon. But what? I know, said Mrs. Crumb, and she whispered Mr. Bacon's ear. Mr. Bacon smiled a small smile which grew to a broad grin. Miss Crumb, he said, I think you have the answer. The following day, Mr. Noisy again went shopping in Wobbletown. He went into Mrs. Crumb's shop. I'd like a loaf of bread, he boomed. Sorry, what did you say? Asked Mrs. Crumb, pretending not to hear. I'd like a loaf of bread, Mr. Noisy shouted. Sorry. Mr. Noisy shouted, sorry, said Mrs. Crumb, her hands out. And speak up. I'd like a loaf of bread, roared Mr. Noisy. I can't hear you, replied Miss Crumb. Mr. Noisy gave up and went I like to go into Mr. Noisy went to the bacon shop. I'd like a piece of meat, he boomed. Mr. Baker didn't notice. I'd like a piece of meat, Mr. Noisy shouted. Did you say something? Asked Mr. Bacon. I'd like a piece of meat, roared Mr. Noisy. Mr. Noisy gave up and went home and went to bed hungry. The day after, Mr. Noisy tried again. He went into Mrs. Crumb's shop. I'd like a loaf of bread, he boomed. What's that? Asked Mrs. Crumb. Mr. Noisy started to shout at the top of his voice. I'd like a loaf of... And then he stopped, and then he thought, and then he said quietly, I'd like a loaf of bread, Mrs. Crumb. Mrs. Crumb smiled gently. Mr. Noisy went to Mr. Bacon's shop. I'd like a piece of meat, he boomed. Did you say something? Asked Mr. Bacon. Yes, I did, shouted Mr. Noisy at the top of his voice. I said I'd like a... And then he stopped, and then he thought... And then he said quietly, I'd like a piece of meat. He's Mr. Bacon. Mr. Bacon's like... So, carrying this bread is me, Mr. Noisy, sat up the hill. And then he stopped, and then he thought, and then do you know what he did? He tiptoed. A tiptoe was something Mr. Noisy had never tried before. It was fun. Mr. Noisy arrived at the front door. He put out his head to open the door. And then he stopped, and then God, and then do you know what he did? He opened the door very quietly. He stepped inside, and then he shut the door very gently. Quietly and gently, which are things Mr. Noisy had never tried before either. That was fun too. And then do you know something? From then until now, Mr. Noisy isn't anything quite as noisy as he used to be. And do you know something else? The people walked on the way, especially Mr. Scrump and Mr. Bacon. Do you know something else? Mr. Noisy has learned how to whisper.